Dick Smith happens to be the creator of the most spectacular and least spectacular makeup effects that ever graced movie genre. He's the most famous for his work in The Exorcist. Um, has won an Oscar for Amadeus and has covered pretty much the whole spectrum from low budget horrors to sweeping miniseries and from mainstream cinema to the classiest scare flicks. He is generally regarded as being the leader of his field. He's certainly the pioneer upon which Rick Baker and the rest of the modern makeup artists have built their craft upon. Makeup is a field that constantly demands new techniques and ways of approaching problems, both to encounter the enormous number of situations the artist is going to find himself rendering, and to add a variety to the brew, trying to do something better or something that hasn't been done before. The trouble Smith found himself in the 40s was not only were there no decent manuals to his craft, there was no communication or help from the people already in the industry. The secrets of the trade were just that, and kept closely, especially from a movie the width of the country away from Hollywood. There was something like a dozen or so professionals in New York at the time, and it was a very unprofitable business. Dick Smith actually prospered. He became head of the makeup department in NBC in 2 years in 1950. He had a staff of 20 artists underneath him. This job lasted for some 16 years before he moved on to bigger and better things. He would go into the world of cinema, introduced by his boss from the TV station, David Susskind. His first 1970s film was Requiem for a Heavyweight. It was a successful film about boxing. Later on in the 70s, that's when he became noticed, starting with Arthur Penn's Little Big Man. This was a critically acclaimed cross between a Western and a vaudeville, narrated by Dustin Hoffman, and it climaxed with Custer's defeat. Smith's major contribution was makeup, turning Dustin Hoffman into a 120-year-old man. Old age makeup is one of the most common challenges outside the bodily transformation of horror films and the like. The trick of the course is to build all the sags and wrinkles without calling attention to them. Not helped by the fact that you're working with a face that is usually well known to the audience in its current form. The sort of realistic character work was Smith's specialty, and naturally enough, creating believably human flesh is the first step in distinguishing it, or putting bullets through it, as was the case in the next major project, Francis Ford Coppola's Gangster. Smith would go on to orchestrate the mayhem of Taxi Driver, Michael Winner's The Sentinel, which was a film made in the mainstream of the same year, alternating most of the audience with its uncompromising gore. Smith also handled both the sequels to The Godfather. In the end, he says not the makeup artist is responsible for any moral implications of their art, but the writers and directors who order them. His concerns is it's not an uncommon one, even in his own profession, but it's the makeup artist's job to create the best and the most believable effect that they can possibly do. Which brings us to The Exorcist, one of my all-time favorite films. Dick Smith took center stage on this one. I'm sure you can recall the girl from The Exorcist, kind of scary. Smith was still working on a fairly small scale at that stage and only had one assistant for his work on The Exorcist. Happened to be a man by the name of Rick Baker, who I mentioned earlier, who would later become famous in his own right. Not to mention Academy Awards for American Werewolf, Ed Wood. The two artists were very close, often describing it as a father-son relationship. It's a current photo of them. Since the 1970s, the special effects of the cinema have transformed themselves into a wonderfully detailed and appreciated art form in their own. Dick Smith was not only the forerunner and inspiration for the new artists that spearheaded the change, but he was in the midst of it, lending his steady hand to many excellent and influential movies. The horror genre owes him a great deal, this amazing man. As he said to Fangoria, which is a magazine that covers movies and blood and special effects makeup, that there's a young part of him that doesn't quite believe it's all happened. But he has exceeded all his wildest dreams, and that's the most incredible joy there is. all in all, Dick Smith, amazing man. If you have some time, you should definitely look into it more, see some of his movies, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thank you.